This is Gil. This is the second part in the debugging with Java and Eclipse. There in the first part I gave you a basic overview of debugging and perspectives. This section is going to talk about breakpoints and how you use breakpoints to analyze various parts of your program. So the first thing you need to do to start debugging is to insert breakpoints. So again, like I showed before, you want to insert the breakpoints on the blue marker bar on the left side of the editor window. So I'm going to put in 3 breakpoints by double clicking. I can also put a breakpoint in by right clicking and saying toggle breakpoint. I can also you can not put a breakpoint. You have to install a breakpoint on a valid line of code. You cannot put a breakpoint on a comment, and you cannot put a breakpoint on white space. So once you have the breakpoints, you can put as many as you want. You start debugging the program using the bug next to the run button. That jumps you over to the debug perspective, and what you'll notice is that the program started and it executed till you hit your first breakpoint. You see how it's highlighted where the final double row rate meters per second variable is highlighted. Up in the top window here labeled debug, you'll notice some information about the stack frame and about the process that's been started. We're going to ignore that for now and jump over to the right where you see the variables tab. This is one of the most important views of debugging, and it shows you the state and the value of all the variables that have been executed so far in your program. So you'll notice that the only value in the variables is the args variable, which is kind of the default that you've been passed in, or that's been passed into main. But because you haven't passed any arguments into it, that is got nothing in it, right? So you see the value is a 0. It's a string array with nothing in it. So what we're going to do is we're going to increment our line of code by 1 position. We're going to go from line 9 to 10. And to do that, we're going to use these buttons up there next to the well, you'll notice that the icons in the debug perspective are different than in the taskbar for the Java perspective, and so they switch things around on you. And so in debug mode, there's really 5 or 6 things that are useful. The ones that we're going to use first are these 2 arrows. There's one here that's called step into, and then one that's called step over. And the difference between these two is mainly when you get to a method and you need to decide if your problem is inside the method and you want to go into that method, or if your issue is on the other side of that method, and just going into that method is going to just be more time, and you know that's not where your problem is. So most of the time you start debugging with the step over, and you get close to where your issue is, and then you can decide if you wanted to step into. Because we don't have a method in our example, then step into and step over do the same thing. And while we're here, these other 2 icons that are important is resume and terminate. So resume allows you to run at full speed again. So let's say you have another breakpoint that's many lines of code away from your first breakpoint, and you don't want to step all the time. You're going to want to just hit resume, and that will start your program again from that same breakpoint. It's not going to start it from the beginning. If you want to start it from the beginning, you have to use the debug view, and that will start everything all over again. And then the red button is to stop if you want to just terminate and you found your bug and you want to edit it and try again. So we're sitting here at the first line, and I'm going to show you how when I step over, you see the highlight went to line 10. And the cool thing is now on the variables tab, you see the mow rate meters per second has the value that you assigned it, 1.5. Same with the width of the mower. And then you have a console object, and so this is a rich variable that's got a lot of things in it, and we won't go over it, but if you want to explore, there's a lot of variables inside this that are being defined, and that's one of the powers of the variables in all the containers, so you can kind of keep track of what are these values. So now I'm on line 16, and when I try to go over line 16, it gets to the next line. But let's see, when I try to go over line 17, everything kind of just halts and it doesn't let me go any farther. Well, the reason being is because this method, nextInt, is waiting for input from the console. And so you see your console windows, just like your Java console here, you're going to have to enter input before it's going to go to the next line. So let's assume that I just want to keep going. I have another breakpoint down here. I don't want to just step through, so I'm going to hit resume. And it's going to ask me for those other variables that I have in the input. So I'm going to just throw in some numbers, and you can see now I have stopped the program at line 30. And if you look up on the variable screen, all the variables that I entered are now quickly set here. One of the things that you can do is you can change the value. Let's say you wanted to change this from 100 to 110 and you didn't want to run your program again. You see what I did? I hit the change value, and I think you can also just do it by clicking once, and then you can change that. So that's a pretty cool debugging tool, and being able to change your variables so then you can do your calculation and not have to spend a bunch of time starting your code over again. And then the last thing is you just keep going through, and if you usually they'll get you back to the Java perspective, but if you don't get back there, you can always click the perspective button in the upper right and you'll be right back to what you're used to, and you can continue to edit. That's all for this lesson. Stay tuned for the final lesson on advanced debugging.